everyone. I am Joe Marcello, joined as always by my bandit brothers, Warren Phillips.
Hey, gang.
And Mike Farah.
Howdy, howdy.
It's that time of week again. It's comic book day, it's hump day, but we call it Dollar Bin Bandit Day. And today we are bringing you our latest and greatest episode, In Your Ear Holes. And it's with none other than someone that really means a whole lot to me and certainly Warren and Mike. He was a guy who was instrumental in me staying with comics at a time when I was uncertain if I still wanted to collect. He was the man behind the artwork in one of my absolutely favorite storylines, Identity Crisis. We're talking to none other than Rags Morales.
Yeah, it was great speaking with him. And I remember reading in Wizard years ago, he was one of the top up-and-coming artists that they were highlighting, and to see how his career has flourished and, you know, touched on so many incredible books. He was a joy to talk to.
Yeah, I really like digging into his early DC work, Black Condor, as well as, you know, some of the stuff he started doing with under Geoff Johns' tutelage, like Hourman and Hawkman, you know, those old JSA stalwarts. And Identity Crisis. Yeah, I mean, we dig into that a lot. That's sort of his magnum opus and, you know, well worth the listen. So here we go, Rags Morales.
I'm going to tell you off bat that I am a huge fan. I've been dying to talk to you for a long time because I am such a fan of your art. I just had to get that out of the way. These guys have had to hear it from me for a while. And we'll get into other stuff, you know, later.
And we're fans too, by the way.
Yeah, no, they are fans too, obviously, but you know, it's all about, no, I'm kidding.
I always like to know I entertain somebody. That's nice. Thank you.
So I have to know, what was your introduction to comics, and how did you get your break into the industry?
Well, it's two polar opposites. You know, I discovered comic books when I was 5. I used to collect the Treasury edition comic books, the large ones. I think I still even have a couple. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, that was you know, I was just a creative kid, you know. Every kid likes to draw, but I love to draw, and I did it all the time. So I was looking for anything that would inspire me to draw more. And being a little kid, you know, Saturday morning cartoons, you know, and there was all kinds of, you know, fantasy world out there. So I pursued that. And my mother says I started drawing when I was 3. So yeah, I'll be 56 in October. So yeah, that's it's been a while. It's been a while. And I went to the Cuban school. Luckily, it was only 15 minutes away from where I was raised. So I didn't have to worry about housing. I could stay at my mother's. And upon leaving, after 2 years, I got work as a silk screener. And then when that didn't pan out, I called the Cuban school and I talked to Mike Chen and asked him for some phone numbers, and he gave me 5 editors at DC. So I made 5 calls and arranged to have 5 interviews in one day. And 2 weeks later, I got my first gig doing Forgotten Realms for TSR.
Wow, nice. We haven't talked to many creators who have gone to the Cuber School. You know, it has a fantastic lore to it. I've known some people that have gone, but you're the first creator that we've talked to that has gone. What was it like for you? I mean, was it a formative experience? Was it more about connections than the actual art, or did you learn a lot about like sort of your draftsmanship that you brought into your career?
It's always contacts eventually, you know. It doesn't start that way. It starts off as rudimentary. You know, Joe had a philosophy of stripping you down. He basically, well, he was an Army veteran, so he treated the school like boot camp. And he basically said, okay, forget everything you know. We're going to start you all over again with the very first lessons, the most basic things to know. And it was so much to know in order to get it in a 3-year course. And I only did it in 2, but in a 3-year course, you would have to do about 8 hours of homework a night. So you would come home from school and be working until midnight.
Yikes.
And it's just homework. It's just work, work, work. This thing was, you can never get better, and the only way you can get better is continuation. So a lot of muscle memory, a lot of thought process, a lot of direction. It's all about storytelling. So you have to understand the concept of directing. Scenery, plays, things of that nature. Try to get everything involved. All the rudimentary stuff, lighting and anatomy and all that, and body language. So that's and then eventually, you cut your teeth in the industry, you're going to eventually run into other graduates, and then the old school calls you back, and they called me back, and I taught for 2.5 years. So it's kind of a thing.
It's really like a grounding in the fundamentals. You're probably not encouraged very much to I hope we still have you.
No.
Yeah, I had a thing come on.
I was going to ask if
they wanted a password.
If you are in that type of school, if you're encouraged at all to really show your specific personality or your style, or is it really like trying to get the fundamentals down, and then once you have that down, then you go into industry and you really find your own way of doing things?
Well, yeah, you come to the table with a certain amount of things that are comfortable to you, and some people are really good at anatomy but not good at posing. Some people are really good at visualization but not storytelling. So it's in the process of learning, you kind of burn through the things and try to pick up things as you go along, to pick up new things and try to add them to your repertoire. And the first year is all about breaking you down. The second year, I taught second year, and I used to tell them that I think second year is about experimentation. Okay, you've gone through the basics, now it's time to try things that you wouldn't normally do and see how that grabs you. And then the third year is putting it all together with a business sense. So, because it is freelance,
right.
Style. It's funny because when I talk about style, I have a very specific point of view. Is that style is an evolution. It's an evolutionary process. It's nothing that you should start off doing as much as you are inspired by this artist or that artist. Try to find your own way. You're not going to lose it. It'll still be part of the background. It eventually comes to the surface again. But when it does come back to the surface, it comes back from a more learned point of view. That's just I guess that's just part of the learning curve. They call it a learning curve for a reason, right? But style is something that's an evolutionary process. It's style is abstraction. It's a process of keeping it simple. Because they say less is more. Is what's that really saying? Is that the abstract is the final level. It's about understanding the basics to the point of it being just muscle memory, like breathing. You just do it,
right?
And it's always nice that you have that in your toolbox, because if you ever find that something doesn't work for whatever reason, you can always go back and do the steps over again. So it's not unlike being an alcoholic. You have a 12-step program. And
you finally get to acceptance.
And and you finally figure it out. So yeah.
So one of your big first projects, especially at DC, was Black Condor with Brian. Is it Augustyn or Augustyn?
Augustyn. Yeah,
Augustyn. Just curious, that was obviously, the character had been around, but you guys were doing a new version of it. How did that all come about? Did you and Brian sort of jam on what this thing was going to be? Did he bring you an idea and you brought some visuals? What was the sort of genesis of the project?
Well, it was prior to Black Condor was my time with TSR and doing the Forgotten Realms comic book. I did 19 issues of that. So that was such a specialized thing. And nobody told me what to do after that was over. you know, and nobody said, well, here's something else, you know. So I found myself having to ask, okay, does anybody else need me for anything? And Kim Yale was my first editor, the late great Kim Yale, wife to John Ostrander. She hired me for Black Condor, and then she eventually left, and then I had Jim Owsley and Elliot Maggin as editors. I think Elliot Maggin was in between Kim and Jim, and so that I you know, just, it's like it is with any, if you're going to break into this industry, you have to understand a certain basic thing, is that there's something called a talent pool, and every editor has their own talent pool. And in that talent pool is groups of artists and writers and pencilers, inkers, colorists, letterers, everyone who it takes to do a comic book, they have their favorites. And it may be a group of 15 people in their stable. They get the projects. So in order for you to break in, you have to constantly say, here I am. If they give you feedback, work on it, give it back to them. Here it is. I always say it's never the answer when you're trying to get a job. It's never not. It's never no. It's just not now. And eventually something's going to come down the line, like Forgotten Realms came down the line, like Black Condor came along. It just showed up at a time when I was looking for something, and they decided to give you a shot. And if they like you well enough and you're productive, you know, that's all that matters, you know.
Now, with what you guys came up with, was there a lot of give and take between you guys and DC as to what they were looking for, maybe style-wise for the character, or were they cool with what you had come up with?
Yeah, it was at the time DC was doing a revisionist thing with a few old properties. They had the Ray, another Lou Fine product, as well as Black Condor. They had Sandman, which is now Neil Gaiman's thing. They revitalized Stormman, and so it was kind of like you just kind of knew by what everybody else was doing, is that you were just basically bringing a fresh take. So you read the script, you read what the character is about, you read the whatever vitals are necessary to know, background, you know, place, the setting, you know. And then you read the first script and you start. It's like if you read a novel, you know. I always tell people it's like reading a novel. When you read a novel, there's no pictures; you just have one to develop in your head. That's what happens. Sometimes it's not as instructional. I think Black Condor was basically visually left up to me. Brian was also editing at the time too. He was editing The Flash. That's when Mark Waid was writing it, and Scott Collins was doing the artwork. I forgot what other projects he had, but he had a couple of things he was editing at the time. So he was writing on the side, editing, and just became a new father. So there wasn't a whole lot of, you know, feedback from him, because I guess he just didn't have time. He looked at it and said, yeah, it looks good, you know, that kind of thing. You know, it's one less thing to have to worry about. I got a colicky baby and, you know, a deadline, you know, I have a hot artist coming in on Wednesday. So, you know, it's there's a lot of things that happen. And so I was like, okay, you know, I guess they didn't expect much. You know, it was just something to throw against the wall. Right. And luckily I was there and I picked up that job as well. So.
Did you see the importance of having a strong Native American character, you know, having his own title at the time?
At the time, he wasn't Native American. He was British. Right. He was old. Oh. He was old money British. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I thought he was.
That version, the Native American came later with the Freedom Fighters.
Gotcha.
Prior to that, and I know we have him dark skin, but I figured a guy's going to be out. He's going to be Tarzan. He's going to be dark skin. You know, he's out in the elements. So, that's basically, he lived in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. And so, you know, he basically floated around and did whatever. And he did have a Native American partner, John Smith, who was a ranger. Mm-hmm. I don't think we described what tribe he was from or where his lineage was from, but So it was inclusive, and so the character was just the lost rich son, which is kind of Tarzan-y, the lost rich son of the Kendall fortune. And his grandfather, Cretan Kendall, ran something called the Golden Wing Society, which had various interests. And I guess the only one that we really explored was the fact that he was trying to come up, Cretan Kendall was trying to come up with a winged force from the skies, a police unit, essentially. Apparently he was in love with this concept of the Greek gods ascending. There was some sort of wing group, I forgot what it was, but there was dispensing justice.
Right.
And rich justice isn't our justice. So he was certainly corrupted by that. And his grandson was given radiation treatments in utero. So when he was born with mutant powers, essentially, of telekinesis. And that's how he flew. He basically floated, with his mind. And adding the wings was just there to add speed and direction and make him look cool.
Gotcha. I also want to jump a bit to your time at Valiant, because we've spoken to some people who work there, and you hear sort of 50-50 as to their thoughts of working there at the time. What was your experience like with Valiant?
It was at the end of Black Condor, because I quit the book, is the reason why they decided to end it. And I think there might have been some hard feelings about that, but there was some bureaucracy that happened with payment that essentially led me to Valiant. I had an editor that told me that that I was on the short list of people they wanted to bring into their group, and so I pursued it, and they said, "Great, here's Archer and Armstrong," and that gave me an issue of that, and then that and then I got a couple of one-offs, so I was a shadow man in there as well. But then they eventually gave me Turok, and I did 15 issues of Turok for them. And it was part of the boom, when you're a freelancer, you work at home. I don't know what it's like. What they used to call Nabro was their production department, and I don't know what it was like, day in and day out. At the time, I lived in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I would take the train into the city to drop off pages. So there was the occasional drop off, but most of the time I was just mailing stuff in, overnight with FedEx. But that was it was really not specific to Valiant, and in that it was just a time of abundance. I remember there was more comic shops opening up everywhere. There were people getting 50,000 units sold of issue 1 because DC decided to kill Superman. So that created a speculation boom. And so it was just a time of it was optimism. It was just it was all just like treatments for movies and TV shows and blah 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 blah. And here's a brand new character, born out of somebody's, the back of somebody's mind. So it was good times for a while, and then toward the end, like all things, what goes up comes down. And after the bust, it was basically scrapping, and I stuck around long enough for my contract, because I was on an exclusive contract, and long enough for my contract to expire. And then I was cut loose, and that was it was about a year and a half of kind of floating around, figuring things out, before I came back with Hourman at DC in '99.
Now, you did work on some kind of comic book stuff. You worked on Dungeons and Dragons. And what was that experience like? Because that was one of these, ever since I was a kid, it's one of these kind of comic book adjacent type of things that, people or kids of our age will get into. And for some reason I never did, but I would always kind of be interested in it. I had friends who were doing it and playing and had all these like, week-long whatever campaigns or whatnot. And I would always talk to them about it. And then I would see all the books that would come out. I'm like, man, the artwork in these things are really like badass. How did you get into doing that?
Well, that's it's funny. TSR is a launching pad for a lot of Cuber students. Tim Truman came in doing some TSR work, I believe. I don't want to give them undue credit, but I think Bissett and Veach and Toddleman and all those other traditional classic Kubert first graduating class group started off doing stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just I don't know how it became there at the time that I was trying to find work. I don't know if it was an ongoing thing. I don't recall. I got it from issue 1, and Ron Randall was doing issue 1, and Jan Duursema was doing issue 1. And then eventually Joe Quesada came on board and was Spelljammer, and he did issue number 1. So we were from the very beginning of, I guess, three Cuba students doing TSR products. I mean, what else is new?
Were you into it? Did you ever play?
It's funny. In high school, I played once and I never played again. And it wasn't for any reason that it's just we never did it again.
Okay.
We were just kids exploring different things. And we did that one day and I was cool. I had a good night. I had beginner's luck. So I was kicking ass, but it's just one of those things. It's just like, okay, on to the next thing, and I don't know. I was a teenager. I was trying to get laid. I was looking to bond over dice, So but when I got into the first thing they did, I was working with Geoff Johns, and Geoff Johns and Kate Novak are married, and they do novels together, and they did a lot of the TSR novels, and they gave me a copy of Azure Bonds with the I know Dragonbait was the sidekick, but I forgot the redhead's name. Oh, I feel terrible. Anyway, so they gave me that, and I thought it was a great read. It was a lot of fun to read, and I enjoyed the characters. And she eventually came into the book on the series I was doing in issue 3, so that was kind of neat. I enjoyed working on Alias was her name, Alias. It was Alias and Dragonbait, and so yeah, I enjoyed exploring fiction. That was already in my head. I already had a universe developed in my head based on what I read, so it was nice to explore that. I was not aware of J.R.R. Tolkien. So I'm not aware of the Hobbits or anything like that. I mean, I've seen drawings of them, but I never made a connection because I never read the books. Right. So it was just, to me, it was just good old fantasy, just I've seen enough Godzilla movies, and I've seen enough, Tarzan and Swashbuckling and Planet of the Apes and things like that. So it was just, to me, it was just a continuation of just, a fantasy realm. But, we were trying to establish rules. We were establishing characters, establishing settings and things like that. So a part of it was a bit Tolkien and having to, and then of course they would give me the Dungeon Master series and the books and everything that came with any drawings of what a beholder looks like, that kind of a thing. And so it was just, just reading, getting inspired and trying to put that on paper. It's the way it is with every project, really.
So as you mentioned, then in the late 90s, you're drawn back to DC. Was it Geoff Johns who brought you back?
No.
Okay.
Geoff Johns was 20 issues later. Okay. I was doing Hourman with Tom Pyre.
Right.
And the way I got back to DC because there was a little bit of a rift in the way that I left, and for the reasons that I left. Getting back is always a difficult process, especially if certain people remember. Yes. But Tony Bedard is one of my oldest friends in the industry, and he was an editor at Valiant, and he was the editor, my editor, on Geomancers. I did 8 issues of Geomancer. That was from the first issue as well. I did a lot of my career has been from the first issue. So he was my editor then, and Maurice Fontenot was my writer. And we just explored a blind guy, with a cane who has the ability to, use the resources of the earth. He was a terraformer, and so he and I go back as far as like 92. I think so we're talking about 6 years later, 1998, 99. He's an assistant editor to Dan Raspler, who was editing, and that was at the time when Grant Morrison was doing the original, the DC 1 million, and he had the Spectre looking Hourman. So they gave me a tryout. Essentially, they gave me a single issue, and it was a Crisis with the Flash, one of the Crisis things, I honestly, it was just, it wasn't that it wasn't forgettable. I just forget it. I just forget it. So I did, I got a chance to do some stuff that DC has never seen me do before. I've always, prior to that with DC was sword and sorcery, sword and sandals kind of stuff. It was Black Condor, who was kind of like on the outskirts of the DC universe. And issue 10, I think, was the last issue I did with them. Or was it 12? I think it was 12. With Batman. So up to that point, that's all they knew about me handling their characters. So when I did the Crisis book with the Flash and some vignettes of DC characters, they had a different. I mean, editors really don't know until you show it to them. Most editors can't perceive potential in an artist, in any character, unless they're given a shot. So that's what happened there, and they felt more comfortable with giving me Hourman, which I kept bugging them for, because I was anxious to get back. I mean, it was about 1.5 years when I was doing magazines, Dragon magazine and Dungeon magazine for TSR. That was the only publishing they were doing. I would do little illustrations for games or something they had in the back of the thing, and it was a little time I was doing some anatomical illustration teaching at a vocational school. But that was just 1 day a week, and there was no money in that. So coming back to DC was a big deal. It was a chance to get a big job, to get a job, and they eventually decided to give me Hourman. And then Dan Raspler left DC. I don't know where he went, but Tony became my editor, and together we did 20 issues of Hourman. And it was a good series. It still has a cult following, and I hope one day they actually reprint it. It'd be fun to see it again all together.
And that began sort of your association with some JSA characters, right? I mean, you did a number of issues, maybe not all sequentially within JSA, and you did Hawkman. From that perspective, that was the kind of first. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the first sort of team book or book with that many characters doing that many sort of costumes and things of that sort. Was that did you enjoy that? Did you find something that or was that like that was the biggest challenge ever?
No, team books. I started with a team book. Forgotten Realms was a team. It was 6 characters. Yeah. It was Agavar, Dwalamar, Omen, Varchan, Heisavar, Foxalon, Cardluck, and Ishi Barasoon, and Minder. It was a golem. So it was 6 characters, and they were floating around on a boat. So I had gotten used to doing it. It was nice to do a singular character with with Black Condor, and only really a smattering of supporting cast. It was really only, you know, John Smith, the Ranger. Not many recurring characters. So that was kind of like a bit of a vacation from team books, which is constantly putting 6 people in every panel, you know, or at the very least, you know, getting enough in there so they're part of the background. Constant reminder. And so when I got back to, and then of course I did Hourman, but then Tom Peyer was such an elaborate supporting cast. They had the love interest in Bethany, and they had Snapper Carr, who came back, and they were hanging out the Mad Yak, you know, and I forgot the proprietor's name. The proprietor was some guy with the walrus mustache, you know. I think I modeled him after who's the one with the big mustache in Credence, or not Credence, Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Dave Crosby?
Was it Dave Crosby?
Yeah, I think it's Crosby.
He had that big walrus thing going on. I think that's where the inspiration came from. I think that was, if I recall, that was in the back of my head when I was coming up with him. But that became a team book only because, you know, it was an action team, but there was still a lot of people in scenes. So coming back to JSA, it was just more of the same. You know, it just feels like, here we go again. You know, I mean, Hourman, the 21 issues I did of Hourman, despite the fact that he was going throughout the, you know, they had Green Arrow was in there. They had Animal Man became a part of it. Everybody showed up eventually. So you had those little team ups that pop in here and there. But doing the JSA stuff was just, you know, just more of the same, you know. And for that, I only mostly did, you know, covers. I did a couple of interior stuff, but when I did Hourman, prior to the JSA stuff, I told Tom, I said, I don't know where you're going with this, but if we can explore the universe, I have some proving to do, you know. And so you know, I tried to do a good take on every character that we got. So, and I continued into Hawkman. So yeah, it was just me, you know, you at that point in your career, you're just looking to find a song you can sing. You know, it's people become synonymous with specific characters. Jim Aparo will always be considered a Batman artist, right? So I approached every character with the sense of, you know, a challenge to absorb it, to give it something that resonates with somebody, certainly with me, because it's coming from me, right? I think that was the reason why I put wraps around Wildcat's hands. No one wrapped their hands like a boxer. That was my idea. And so when I did that, that was just an investment. That was just me, just, you know, exploring some of the freedom they were giving me to try to do. Essentially, it's like when you're working for DC or any other comic company, it's just like, okay, here's a character, do something with it so that we could sell it, you know? And that's really the inspiration. It's one part, you know, trying to survive in a very competitive market, at one part trying to make your inner child happy, one part trying to make the audience happy, try to make the editor happy, the publisher happy, try to make everybody happy by just doing a good representation. Just don't make them goofy, I guess is what it boils down to. Unless it's necessary, you know, like the Elongated Man is kind of goofy.
Right. Not what you could do.
Whoa. Let's not mess with Elongated Man, because I got questions.
You see what I did there, right? That they call that a segue.
Warren, you're up, then I go. Go ahead.
I just want to talk quickly about the working relationship you have with Michael Blair, because how important is it for you as a penciler to have an inker you can trust, who sees your vision and complements it as well as he does?
You know what? It's I love Mike. I really did love working with him. He described his style as techno-organic. It's perfect. Clean enough to be technical and organic enough to be, you know, sloppy, I guess, or sloppy enough to be organic, you know, or soft enough. I can't call it sloppy, I call it soft enough or fleshy enough to be organic. Yeah, I was lucky, you know, he was available, and I admired the work he did with Steve Sadowski. Mm-hmm. Sadowski. On the work they were doing, because of course I was given all the material of Hawkman and JSA and all this other stuff that follows, so I was already aware of his ability. And so when he became available to me, I said absolutely. You know, I had all the respect for his work, and he came on. And as a penciler, you try to find someone that you can jam with. You know, there are two kinds of people that ink in the industry. There are inkers with terrific lines but can't draw, and then you have embellishers who can draw and will take over an artist. So you try to find a little balance, you know, somewhere between, okay, this is what I'd like, now fluff it up, you know. And you don't always get that, you know. A lot of guys are just like, they'll only do what's there. Some even have the attitude of just like, you know, they don't pay me enough to do as much work as you want me to do, you know. And so you got to find a balance of being, it's a jam, you know. This is my riff, and you compliment it. We go back and forth, and before you know it's dueling banjos, you know. And so I don't know if that's a reference everyone else gets.
Okay.
Deliverance.
Yes.
There you go. There you go. Or at the very least, the scene from Benny Hill and Yakety. But so working with him was just like, yeah, he gets it, you know, and he's not shy because he can draw, because he's really a better artist than people realize. I mean, they see him as an inker, but the man flat out can pencil and ink. He's done plenty of pinup work in the industry that's just solely him. So when you have someone who could draw as well as he does, well, then the embellisher is going to come out. And that's what I had. I had an embellisher for many years. I worked with him on some JSA stuff. Hawkman, of course. And, you know, and other things. But I'll wait for you that question. Go for it, Joe.
All right. So New 52. No, I'm kidding. That's another question, though. No. So you worked on a series that, for me, at the time, came out at a time when I was questioning my interest in comics. I was like, you know, a lot going on. I don't know if I want to continue reading comics. And then Identity Crisis came out.
It was a time, and not to cut you off, but yeah, you're right. It was a time. Look, it was the post 90s hangover, you know. So the early 2000s was trying to wash away the 90s and try to find something else. And DC had a really smart idea to not go with just comic book writers, to talk to novelists and screenwriters, that, you know, where you get your well, obviously your Brad Meltzer, but also your excuse me. Oh, whew. Yeah, your Greg Ruckas, you know, and people who are just outside of the industry with a different point of view, and that is very nice, you know, because these people are used to being very instead of instructional, more visual in the way that they would present a story, because they're so used to being a novelist and having to paint a picture. So working with Brad and Greg, I did some work with Greg too on Wonder Woman and some Superman stuff. It was nice to not hear instruction, but to be instructed. You know, it's the difference between, you know, reading a manuscript and reading poetry. You know, both tell you something.
Yeah, what I wanted to say was just you know, I started reading that story, and the story alone was unlike anything that had really happened in comics per se. You know, like it was, you know, other than it being about heroes, it was kind of grounded in reality. If you switched out you know, maybe some of the occurrences and the fact that they're wearing costumes, that's the type of stuff that could happen in real life, or has, you know. And combine that with your artwork that was just, it blew me away. I mean, like you felt Elongated Man's pain, you know, when he is wrapped himself around his wife, and he's just melting. It blew me away. And I was like, nope, all right, I'm still in for the ride. I'm in for comics. Let's go. And it just like, it was Identity Crisis and Final Crisis and this and Geoff Johns' work on Green Lantern. It just kept going, man. And just, it hooked me in for comics, and I'm still here. How big was that within DC? I mean, you talked about what a pleasurable experience it was for you to work on. You know, who pitched that to DC? Was it Brad, or was it DC going to Brad?
Well, Brad already had done some work with Green Arrow. You know, he did the Archer's Quest, I think it was called.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so that was getting quite a buzz. I recall them giving Brad a list of characters that he could off. He wanted to do a murder mystery. So they gave him a list, and that's how I guess Sue became part of the Collateral Damage. That at the time I just came off a 21 issue run of Hawkman, and they had both things cooking at the same time. Geoff had left Hawkman, and he was already working on Rebirth, the Rebirth series. And they gave me, because there was me and Ethan Van Sciver were the available artists to them, and they were going to give Ethan Van Sciver Identity Crisis, and I was going to get, you know, the Green Lantern Rebirth stuff. But I had just come hot off of a Hawkman run, and you know, they needed Identity Crisis out first, so they said, here, you know, you're coming in running, so run with this. At the time that I got it, I was talking to Geoff Johns, because we used to communicate constantly, and we would call each other. This is back when people still called each other. Emails weren't the only thing that we do anymore. Now it's all emails to Zoom. But we would call each other, and he didn't tell me what he was working on. He said he was doing some Green Lantern stuff. I said, oh, that's cool. He says, but don't worry about it. They got something for you. It's going to be really good. Because Geoff was in on everything. He was already at that point part of the intellectual properties group. So he understood what was happening prior to me knowing. And so he said, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. It's going to be wonderful. And when they gave it to me, they only gave me the first issue, I think, to look at and to go over it. And I didn't know much else. I didn't know where it was going. I remember they brought me into New York to have a meeting, and I went down to the bowels of the DC offices that I never knew existed. I mean, where they had the long meeting table and glass walls. I mean, you could, you know, see the meeting room from the outside, from the hallway. And it was, so they brought me down there. It was, you know, because following the hallway, the whole structure of DC was kind of like going through a labyrinth, you know. So I had no idea where where they were taking me, and of course it was down the stairs, so it was areas that I had never seen before. But at the end of this long meeting table was Brad Meltzer, and I walk in, and they introduced me to Brad, and Brad comes. It's kind of like the scene from Network. I don't know if you've ever seen the 1976 movie Network, yeah. where Ned Beatty is at the end of a table with all the lamps going down leading to him. It was kind of like walking into that, except Ned Beatty came walking to me, and he gave me a big hug. So that's the first thing that Brad did, and which kind of took me by surprise, you know. And he just looked at me and says, "Hey, you know, I'm Jewish. It's what we do." I said, "Well, you know, I'm a Latino, so that's what we do. So it's nice to know you, Brad." and so we just sat there, and I had something, I had a notebook with me so I could take notes, and we talked about it, and I did little sketches as we talked. And I don't know how long, it might have been an hour or two, just discussing ideas and stuff. And they gave me the first issue, and away I went, and they were going to piecemeal the story to me because it had to be so hush hush that they couldn't afford to give it to an artist that's like, oh, and this is going to happen. Oh my God, wait till you get to issue 3, and then 4 is going to blow your mind. They didn't want to have that. They wanted it to keep it, close to the vest. So I would just do an issue and then do another issue. And it was really enthralling because in the meeting, talking to Brad, it was just like, and he says, and then I have this one scene where the Atom's going to be trying to rip through a rope to save his wife's life, and so
like bust through the
22 panels of him slowly, because he had it in his head, and he had this whole thing already planned out. A lot of there were 2 times in my career where I've worked with a writer, I had everything down in a specific way. It was Brad, and it was with Grant, and both times you couldn't, especially with Brad, because I was only getting 1 issue at a time. I couldn't take any scene for granted. A lot of times when you're given a script, you're given descriptions that are designed to just kind of like fluff up the imagery, again, like reading a novel, right? Just trying to get that visual representation. And once you have the picture in your head, everything else just becomes superfluous tools if necessary. And sometimes you use some of it, sometimes you just, but most of the time you're just eliminating stuff. But this particular time, I was given the instructions. I'm thinking he wants 22 panels over a double page spread, each one being its own drawing of the same thing. Hell no, I'm not doing that. Screw this guy. I don't care he did Archer's Quest. I don't care about this dude. Yeah, I did this. There's no way I'm going to take care, because I got this attitude. Go ahead. I think it's
it's all good.
But I was just, it was just one of these, it wasn't at the very beginning because I'd already done a couple issues. So this was just about when I was getting to the satellite scene with Sue and Dr. Light. And so I was, pissing him on how I had to do these 22 panels. But by the time I got to the scene at the satellite, I realized I'm starting to sweat a little bit, and I'm getting a real heavy reaction. Brad was a brilliant storyteller in the script, because he's a novelist. And so he would know exactly, it wasn't like he painted such a grand picture. It wasn't. It was just a couple words here and there that would just, it was like notes in a song, bing, bong, boom. And so you got into this rhythm, and I realized I'm like, really, not only am I invested in the story, I'm mostly very emotional about this scene, and it's making me angry. And I realized, oh my God, that's when I knew how good this story really, really was. So I just put the script down, and I remember I was laying in bed with my then wife, and she heard me all along. I'll screw this. I'm not doing it. And then I read that. By the time I got to that scene, I was just like, if he wants 22 pounds, he's going to get 22 pounds because this is just, the way he paced it was just so brilliant. So well done. All I had to do was sing that song with him to be able to jam, be the banjo to his acoustic. And so that's what happened. And so anything that I did add to that storyline, that went beyond the description, there's always, of course, there are 2 basic scenes that everyone always brings up: Batman holding Robin,
I was going to mention that.
Ralph holding Sue, and the fight scene with Deathstroke.
Yeah,
those are the 3 things that are constantly coming back to me. So of all of those, only one of those was just something that I said, no, let me try this. And that was the Sue and Ralph thing. He wanted a down shot. He wanted a Shawshank Redemption, rain coming down. But I couldn't get Shawshank out of my head. I seen the movie. I knew exactly what he wanted, and I tried it, and all I got was the movie in my head. And I was like, yeah, this feels like a ripoff, So I called him up. I said, listen, I want to try a different angle, and I want to drop the horizon so that it's still looking down, but at an angle and not straight down. And which afforded me the ability to stretch his body more, because what I wanted to really emphasize in that scene, and at the time when I was doing the entire Identity Crisis run, I was playing the band live, and they had an album called Throwing Copper, and the songs like Lightning Strikes, and it was a very emotional music, very just emotionally reactionary music that fed emotionally reactionary story that really got me into the groove of everything. And so so getting into that particular scene was just me saying, okay, like this song, there's a weight in the song that everyone's trying to pull from because the weight is so terrible. And that's what Sue was. Sue was this weight. She was dead. She was a husk. She was nothing but a memory at that point, but a heavy one. And the angle that I called for, I really wanted to emphasize his stretch, because no matter, that was his superpower, no matter what. The only thing that was visually his superpower, besides his, I mean, being a detective doesn't take superpower, it just takes great intellect, the observational skills, right? But his superpower was stretching. So the one thing that made him special couldn't save his wife. And that was the important thing to me in that particular scene. That was really the only time I ever took anything over. And other than that, I was just adding something like, of course, Brad likes to bring up the eyeball thing with Tim Drake at the scene where Batman is holding him. But that's about it. Most of the time, it was just Brad.
I read that you did a lot of character study, prep work. I guess what you would call rehearsal if it were a live play. Was it only the sort of the scope of the project that allowed you to do that? I would imagine you don't usually get that much time or sort of prep time to get it under your belt, but how valuable was that going into, this project where you're only getting an issue by issue, breakdown?
And at the time, that was a very productive year, because prior to that, I did Black Rain for Hawkman, which was a JSA Hawkman crossover. That year I did 263 pages, so I was cooking. I was producing 5, 6, 7 pages a week, depending on how it was structured. There was a lot of production work, for instance. There was a lot of repeating backgrounds. I only drew it once. It had production for me, but it was a very productive year for me. I don't know where I got the energy from at the time. My then wife afforded me the ability to just work and not worry about children, and that was my second wife. So I had my first kids coming over for weekends, and and my second wife and I had a child, my youngest, who was now 19. So there were times where she would just have to take care of everything. Yeah. And she afforded me the ability. It was a big credit to her, because she actually blocked out the time. She gave me between 9 and 6 every day. And then after that, she was just like, all right, now I'm out of here. It's your turn. So it was a script that was just at times easy to produce because of the way that it was structured with the repeating backgrounds, that kind of thing. It was a tight script, so there wasn't a lot of thinking other than what could I add to it. So yeah, and as you referenced, what you read was the collected edition, and in the back they had an interview of Brad and I. And yes, you always in your mind you're thinking there's the great American comic book that you're going to do, kind of like the great American novel, except for nerds and comic nerds. And so you say, okay, I always envision myself building a set and lighting it and taking photos, and I'm going to research this character, and I'm going to do front and 3/4 view and side view and do the whole emotional array with this character, and have that built up, and have the ultimate character reference sheets, and being able to build up the scene and do blueprints of the house so that you understood where everything was when you turn the camera within a specific room throughout a page, all that stuff. And I do that still. I did Amory Wars with Claudio Sanchez of Coed and Cambria. I did a book with him where I had 2 houses where I actually did the floor plan too. So that's just part of the way you do it. But yeah, you know, a big thing was the characterization. Who would be in my movie, right? And because it was my movie and because it was never really going to be done, I could use past and present characters and future, you know, variations, you know. So I would use, you know, people like who the hell did I use? There's so many of them, you know, like Johnny Depp as Nightwing, you know, or what the hell is the name of the it was married to Angelina Jolie, the blonde. Brad Pitt as Wally West, you know, that kind of thing, you know, and William Hurt as Barry Allen. You know, a shaved mustache. Tom Selleck is Batman, you know, at the scene when they're exposing their faces. So I even had George Bush in there as one of the villains.
Let's not get political.
And if you come to a comic show, come to a Comic-Con and bring your copy of Identity Crisis, and I'll go through all the Easter eggs for you. There's a few in there. But yeah, yeah, it was great fun, you know. It was, you know, being a kid all over again for the first time. And, you know, it's not about building a career, it's about becoming to a certain plateau of your career, you know, a crescendo of your career where things are just finally coming together for you. And you could afford those fantasies of building this and doing that. And I did an awful lot of work in the thumbnails too. I mean, I was working with something called Prismacolor markers. Now, people know that there's a full rainbow set, but there's also a set of grays, gray tones from black to 90% gray, 80% all the way down to 10%. So you had a full array of grays, and you had them in cold and warm colors. So I was able to play off the light in the thumbnails and do it in marker, and then I would give that to the colorist as well. So Alex Sinclair had a copy of the thumbnail, so we understood the lighting, what was going to be a cold source and a warm source, and that kind of a thing. And it knocked out.
That's pretty interesting. No one has really, at least the artists we've spoken to, have really gone into the.
Well, there's no time.
You know, that's really interesting.
When you're doing continuity, there's just no time. You know, I mean, you eat up to 6 months it takes for you to get started. And then before you know it, you're just trying to get enough work in so that somebody else doesn't take over the book for you. You know, I mean, that's the way basically you have a 6-month lead time, and then they start looking at your pace and saying, okay, at this issue he's going to need help, you know, or she's going to need help. They're going to need help at issue 6 or issue 7. So we'll plan a break where they'll have that script done, and it'll be a one-off, not part of related continuity, in between the story arcs, and we'll give to somebody else. And then they're working simultaneously with you as you're working the next issue after them. So you're working that's how you build a buffer. But there's no time for that. You know, again, this was a thing where it was a finite time. It was 7 issues, roughly 38 pages an issue. And, you know, it was all there. It's the beauty of having everything all there, you know. The settings were all there. All the information was there for you. Nobody had to make anything as you go along. What slows a book down, from a penciler's point of view, is building things as you go along, and that's not easy to do. And you need that lead time in order to get that going. You have to have the hero's headquarters. You have to have their fortress of solitude or their apartment, and you have to know, you know, the supporting cast and where they live in that scenario. And so you have to have all that built up, and that's what slows an artist down, really. So if you can get to a project where you do all the prep work ahead of time, it's like cooking. It's not trying to find what's in the refrigerator at the time you need it or what's in the pantry at the time you need it. It's about getting everything, all the ingredients out, doing all the prep work, and then you do the cooking. And that was the great thing about Identity Crisis. And it was a wonderful experience and a great creative team. I mean, Alex Sinclair, Mike Baer, you know, Brad, you know, everybody, even Ken Lopez, the letterer, everybody was just it was machine. You know, we really knocked it out. So, I mean, and that's not to say I wouldn't, you know, take things back. There's a few scenes I'd rather do all over again, but for the most part, you know, some days I look at it and it's like shit, and some days I look at it and it's like, oh, you know, I actually did something cool. So, you know, and subtlety was, that's how I got the job. Subtleties, emotional support for that book.
Fabulous for me, and you know, I'm sure the other guys as well. It's just such a great, amazing story. But as a Superman fan, I have to ask you about the work you did on New 52. You know, it came out at a time when DC was, you know, changing things up, just reinventing or, you know, kind of redoing everything. You, at the time, you know, there was two styles of Superman. There was the armored, or, you know, the no underwear on the outside, red belt Superman with the collar and the cuffs and the whole thing. And then the bulkier t-shirt style with the cape, which I thought was the more badass of the two, to be honest with you. Only because like it was more grounded, you know, like I could wear that outfit, you know, minus the cape, of course.
You did wear that outfit, didn't you?
I did. I was wearing it last week. When you know, you're given Superman, are they giving you any, you know, direction, or like this is what I'm going to do for Superman? Here, take that.
A little yes and no. I mean, Grant, like Brad, had a vision, you know, and if anybody's ever worked with Grant, realizes that it's quite a roller coaster ride, a lot of twists and turns. But when they approached me with the look for Superman, they said, well, we're going to pair you up with Grant Morrison. We're going to put you on Action issue #1, and we're going to start all over again. I said, cool. And there were two things that kind of popped in my head, because I realized there was a stripping down of the character. Was past was no longer relevant. We're starting over again. And to me, the greatest and most spot on representation of what Superman was supposed to be was the Max Fleischer cartoons. And I had that in the back of my head because it was just like, okay, this is cool. You know, the train hurt him, you know, when he ran into the train, or the train ran into him. So it hurt him. It made his ears bleed. I like that. He's no longer impervious to everything. You know, things hurt him. And so when I saw, you know, I forgot the name of the particular, it's the one, probably the Mad Scientist is the name of it, where he's being zapped with electricity and he's in pain, you know, we were able to bring that back. So that was beautiful. And if we're going to bring stuff to grassroots, well, there are certain iconographies in comics that work regardless. And when they couldn't figure out what Superman looked like with a t-shirt and jeans and boots, I says, well, the iconography that comes to my mind is Little Abner, you know, the Al Cap strip of the 1950s and 40s. So I was like, well, it's easy. Of course, it's got to look like that guy, you know, with a little bit of Elvis in there, and you got it. And so that's what I was trying to do. You know, I was trying to do a young Elvis / Max Fleischer cartoon / I'm sorry, I have something distracting me. Somebody tried to message me. Max Fleischer / Little Abner, and you know, and Elvis. You know, just put them all together. And you know, I dug it because I'm a big fan of EC Comics. I'm a huge, obviously, as you can see, I'm a huge fan of Frank Frazetta. So, and he was doing the Al Cap Little Abner at the time too. He was the ghost artist. So it was just like, well, yeah, it's just, you know, just drawing what I've always loved about comics, you know. And so that was great fun, although the scripts were very challenging. Yeah. I
was disappointed when I always, for some reason, when the whole New 52 thing started and they have two styles happening at the same time, or two series happening at the same time, I thought they were different timeline. Like I thought there was like different versions. I didn't realize that they would converge at some point, and you would then change from one version to the newer version, because I was so against that newer version. And I'm not knocking anything, because I did tell Dan DiDio about it at the time. I had reservations. but you know, and he was cool about it. But at any rate, yeah, I was.
It was, but isn't that the way we write stories today, right? We give, identity crisis, right? 3 days ago, and they give you that little bit, 10 minutes from now. It's always this jumping forward, pulling back, going back and forth. So in a way, it's just kind of like the way comics are written, just an entire, series of books.
Yeah. Wait a little while, it comes back around, and all will be well with the world.
That's it. That's it. It's Batman and Robin circa 1966 versus Neil Adams Batman. It's just it eventually there's a little buffer, a little friction where they come together. So.
Well, Rags, I got to thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure for us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to chat with us about it, and it's been great just talking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for, ringing me up,
Oh yeah. And yeah, it's great because, again, like I said, and I'm fanboying out, like Identity Crisis for me at the time, it was and this has nothing to do with the show, so I will cut this out, but there was a lot going on in my life at the time, and I was like, I cannot focus on comics. And I was reading this, and all the scenes that you mentioned, for me, I was like, no, this is my one thing to separate me from all the other crap going on. I'm sticking with it. So it was,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So that's why I want to, when Orman's like, when are you available? I was like, I will do it on like a Sunday morning if he wants. I don't care. So
that's cool.
At any rate.
Anyway, Rex, can we? I wanted
Mike,
to ask. Yeah. Sorry, to step on your lines there. I just wanted to, in case the folks out there that are listening, watching, want to keep up with you. Are you on social? You got your own website? Anything you want to plug? This is your time to do it.
I wish I had like all the where all the kids are today. I have a Facebook page, Rags Morales art page. I do a lot of communicating there, but I try to channel everything, try to funnel everything into my website, which is actually a Tumblr that no one's on anymore. But if you want to find out
what's now,
if you want to find out what's going on with me, that's the two ways to get in touch with me. I usually communicate first through Facebook because I have over 5,000 people following me there. So that's my large audience. And because so few people are on Tumblr, I only got, like 1,400 on Tumblr. But I tease people into my Tumblr. So, and I leave the link. So those are the two places you can find me, and you can find my convention schedule. I put that on my Tumblr as well. I pin it to the top. I have Grand Rapids, Michigan this year. I have Lexington, Kentucky this year. I have Roanoke, Virginia, and I also have Albington, Virginia.
Okay.
RobCon. So I'll be RobCon, I'll be Big Lake, I'll be at Lexington Comic Con, and I'll be at Grand Rapids so far. And they haven't given me anything so far for June, July, and August, but I assume I'll get something along the line. So follow me on ragsagainstthemachine.net. That'll get you to my Tumblr. Or you can follow me on Rags Morales art page on Facebook. That's cool because people can notify, whenever I post something. And I do a lot of commission work that I put up on there. And when I get ready to announce, finally, after COVID and another year of finding a new publisher, the project that Jim Starlin and I don't want to get too far ahead. It hasn't been there. I haven't signed any contracts yet. But Jim Starlin and I have a trilogy we've been trying to find, and we think we found a publisher. So I'll be making that announcement. Right now, commission lists, I make announcements on my Facebook, and I have a whole process for that. So, look me up for that. And conventions and I have 6 pages of Hercules coming out for an independent. And I'll be announcing all those things. So as they come along, just follow me. I'll bring your attention to you, and you can check it out.
Welcome back, everyone. I love talking to Rags, guys. I got to tell you, it was such a pleasure to talk to someone who I was absolutely in awe of when I, saw his artwork initially. I was blown away by how cool he was. So chill, so many great stories. And to talk to the guy who basically, like I said, kept me in comics. I mean, Identity Crisis was such a big deal to me. His artwork combined with the writing of Brad Meltzer in that story was just fabulous. So it was great talking to him.
And one thing he said is that there are little Easter eggs that he put in as an artist in each of these stories. And I think that's fascinating to hear. I'd love to, as he offered, sit and go through like these little things, because I'm sure that happens with a lot of artists and things that we just don't see.
Yes, so many details that were part of, especially Identity Crisis, but I'm sure a lot of his other books, and just his process for bringing these characters to life and really sort of evoking a lot of emotion out of them was very interesting to hear from the artist's perspective. So thank you, Rags. Thanks, guys. Another episode in the can, and we are excited to bring you more. So keep listening, keep subscribing, and we'll see you next time.